Chilliwacks, a picturesque town nestled amidst the mountains of British Columbia near the beautiful Chilliwack River Valley. At first glance, life seems idyllic, a postcard of tranquility. But beneath this veneer of normalcy lies a truth whispered in hushed tones, a crisis hidden in plain sight. The streets here tell a tragic story, one etched in the gaunt faces of its lost and forgotten souls. Drug addiction has wrapped its insidious tendrils around Chilliwack, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and broken dreams filled with hopelessness and despair. It's a crisis that's not easy to ignore, tucked away in the shadows of Chilliwack's charming facade. The local residents, shielded by their privilege, choose not to see the sadness lurking just beyond their manicured lawns. But the crisis is growing, a festering wound on the soul of Chilliwack, a stark reminder that even in a seemingly perfect paradise, darkness finds a way to the surface. It's a tale of two cities, of stark contrasts and uncomfortable truths, playing out against the backdrop of a community grappling with its own demons. Here you will meet those living on the fringes, the human faces behind the inaccurate statistics and the forgotten casualties of this silent crisis. They are mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, each with their own story of how they ended up in this place, caught in the unforgiving grips of addiction. Their stories are raw, unfiltered, and deeply unsettling. They speak of a system that has failed them, a community that has turned its back, and a sense of hopelessness that hangs heavy in the air. During this investigation, I'll be delving into the heart of Chilliwack's crisis, talking to those living on the streets, the service providers who work here, and figuring out how the situation became so dire in such a short time. It's a journey that will lead us into the darkest corners of Chilliwack, exposing many uncomfortable truths and challenging our perceptions of this pretty little town. It's a story that needs to be told, and a call to action for a community teetering on the brink of destruction. My first encounter is with Michelle, a young woman huddled beneath a torn-up blanket, her eyes reflecting a pain that masks her rough but youthful appearance. She tells me her tragic story, a chillingly familiar tale of addiction, loss, and a descent into a world most of us wouldn't want to imagine. She speaks of her constant struggles to find support, of steel doors slammed in her face, and a system that seems designed to keep her trapped in a cycle of helplessness. Then there's James, a young man whose weathered face tells a story of too many years spent on these filthy streets, alone and without a place to call home. He spoke with a quiet dignity. His voice shakes with a weariness that speaks volumes. James tells me about the constant fear, his daily struggle for survival, and the crushing loneliness that penetrates his existence. He speaks of his longing for a better life, a comfortable life that seems agonizingly unattainable for him. Their stories are echoed by countless other unique situations, and the people I meet on the streets of Chilliwack know it all too well. Each encounter paints a picture of an unending desperation, of lives shattered by addiction and mental health concerns, leading to unemployment and eventually homelessness. They are trapped in a vicious cycle, ostracized by society, their humanity stripped away by those who view them as a problem to be solved and not people in need of a compassionate helping hand. The despair in their voices is concerning, a stark reminder of the human cost of this unnecessary human crisis. It's a sobering reminder that behind the statistics, behind the labels of addict or homeless junkie, are real people with heartbreaking stories to share, each deserving of our compassion and understanding. Each having a unique set of skills and talents that with proper guidance and empathy could easily be shared and monetized for the world to enjoy and to create a source of income and pride. Their stories also shed light on some of the authoritarian type service providers who are seemingly uncaring and judgmental, intentionally creating drama and chaos for people in a vicious attempt to deny them their necessities and basic human rights. These certain staff members dangle the promise of help, only to snatch it away in an instant, leaving those in need feeling more desperate and abandoned than ever before. These stories are a powerful indictment of a society that has failed their own citizens, a society that has allowed this crisis to grow exponentially in its midst. As I delve deeper into Chilliwacks' unique humanitarian crisis, I'm struck by a palpable sense of fear that permeates the entire community. It's a fear that manifests itself in many different ways, from the averted gazes of passers-by to the hostile and unnecessary stares that are directed at those living on the streets. It's a fear that has driven a wedge between the haves and the have-nots, creating a chasm of misunderstanding and an inappropriate distrust where it's not welcome or necessary. This fear is evident in the physical barriers that have been erected throughout the entire town, a bleak reminder of the community wanting to keep the problem at arm's length and hidden from sight. Shops install spikes to prevent people from sleeping, parks are fenced off after dark, and any benches have been removed for fear of people congregating. These barriers, while intended to create a sense of security, only serve to further isolate and dehumanize those living in an already difficult situation. The isolation runs deeper than just these physical barriers. It's present in the whispers and rumors that circulate here about those living on the streets, inaccurately painting them as dangerous criminals to be feared and avoided at all costs. Any attempts to establish support services or affordable housing are met with opposition by locals and haven't had any realistic ideas attached to them. This type of response only serves to exacerbate the problem, pushing those in need further into the shadows and making it even harder for them to access the help that is so desperately needed. The irony of it is that this fear is often misplaced. While it's true that there are some individuals struggling with addiction who may resort to petty crime as a means to support their habits, the vast majority are simply trying to survive, their days consumed with finding food, shelter, and necessities necessary for survival. By focusing solely on this fear, the community fails to see the humanity in those it seeks to exclude from existence, perpetuating a cycle of prejudice and misunderstanding. One might assume that in the face of such a crisis, many support systems would be readily available, offering a potential lifeline to those struggling and trying to gather enough strength to escape the clutches of a horrible addiction that's not easy to let go of. Conversations with some of the service providers and those they serve paints a far more complicated and troubling picture to grasp. The few organizations that exist are often overwhelmed, understaffed, and ill-equipped to deal with the complex needs of the population they serve. What's even more concerning is the approach taken by some of the people who claim to help using a system that often seems more focused on controlling people than exercising compassion. Strict rules, rigid schedules, and a zero-tolerance policy for relapses and breaking unrealistic rules actually create an environment that feels more akin to a prison than a place of healing and helping. Those seeking this much-needed help are often treated with suspicion, their every move scrutinized and their voices being silenced, leaving them with a feeling of shame and discomfort. I spoke to one young man, Brandon, who described his experience at a local shelter as dehumanizing and humiliating. He spoke of the constant threat of expulsion for minor infractions, the lack of privacy, and the feeling that he was being treated like a child rather than an adult capable of making his own decisions for his own life. Instead of providing a supportive environment for recovery, these institutions often end up replicating the very power dynamics that contributed to the problem in the first place. The lack of compassion within this broken system is perhaps the most disheartening aspect of Chilliwacks' crisis. Instead of being met with understanding and empathy, those who have been struggling with addiction are often treated with disdain as well as cruelty and judgment. They are sadly made to feel like failures, with their struggles purposefully dismissed as a lack of willpower or moral failing, and their weaknesses brought forward for all to publicly discuss, as if being publicly humiliated is supposed to help them in some way. This lack of compassion only serves to deepen the sense of shame and isolation, making it even harder for them to break free from the cycle of addiction and attempt to transition into what society deems to be a normal existence.